Joining me now is Women's Forum Australia's Head of Advocacy, Steph Bastiaan. Steph, look, we seem to be making progress in the fight to return the world to gender common sense. Obviously, that progress is not linear. And then in the Albanese government, Minister Catherine King has accused Donald Trump of sowing division because he dared to back basic biology. We still have a little way to go in Australia, don't we?
Yeah, we certainly do. Not only were hers and Jacinta Allan's comments inappropriate, they were totally dismissive of the issues that are facing women because of our policies that prioritise gender ideology over women's sex-based rights. I mean, we have women in prison who are being housed with male offenders. We have little girls going to school and having to share bathrooms with male students. And parents are telling me that their girls are holding on all day rather than going out of embarrassment or for fear of their safety. We have women being injured in sport because of our inclusive policies that allow men to identify into female teams. Some of these are head injuries, stomach injuries, broken bones. It's absolutely horrendous. So these comments, I mean, not only are they being divisive, they are totally dismissing the issues that are being faced by women today as a result of bad government failure to address this issue. And quite frankly, the train left the station before Trump got elected. His policies are simply surcharging the demand for change in this country.
And Steph, just a point. I mean, this issue was a real sacred cow, you know, even 12, 18 months ago. Do you think we are making some progress here in Australia, at least being able to more openly speak about it?
Oh, absolutely. I think more and more people are speaking up across the political spectrum. There was silence, I think, for a long time, particularly from people on the left who saw themselves as allies, but increasingly, particularly as other groups such as lesbians and same-sex people are being affected, they're realising that this gender ideology is just taking over everywhere, and that it's no longer about equal rights, it's about submission, and it's gone so far, and the harm is so great to women and to girls and to all the rest of it. More and more people are realising that it's not based on common sense, and it's got to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, some recent research conducted by employment service Zimia has shown that in the US, 75% of DEI positions were held by white Americans. And ironically, blokes still seem to earn more than women despite preaching equality. Now, I find this, hysterically funny. Doesn't it just show how shallow and disingenuous this mantra has been from right at the very beginning?
Oh, absolutely. These sorts of roles were always about PR exercises, particularly by governments and woke corporations. I remember going to the Northern Territory when the Voice campaign, just to bring it back home, and I met with community organisations who were working on the front line with women facing domestic violence or getting young offenders back on track after a stint in prison. And while, inner city elites were arguing about, land rights and the Voice, they had government funding being stripped for them, and they're no longer able to deliver those services. I think that big corporations and government departments that want to do the right thing should be putting these $300,000 salaries to better use, quite frankly. But there doesn't seem to be any initiative to do that, probably because there's very little to be gained from a PR perspective out of it.
Yeah, well, I've just thoroughly enjoyed light being shone down on this. It has been a very interesting week, that's for sure. And look, women's rights groups, and you raised this earlier, they've long fought to keep biological men out of women's prisons. And this is now the reality in the US. Can you tell us about the executive order?
Yeah, it's a brilliant executive order. I'm so pleased that it's happened because women in prison are some of the most marginalised and most vulnerable in society. They often come from backgrounds of abuse and trauma and neglect. They suffer greater mental health issues and often addiction problems as well. And the last thing that they want, the last thing that they need is to have male offenders being placed in prisons with them. It's grossly unfair, and I think what the Trump administration has done here is common sense, and it's something that we need here in Australia too. We know that there are male sex offenders and male perpetrators being housed in female prisons, self-IDing into female prisons. There was an example of this raised a couple of weeks ago by Ruddocks magazine, where late last year, a male offender, he was arrested as a male, He was out on bail in male accommodation on paedophilia charges. Then during sentencing, housed and placed into a female prison. I mean, it's just not good enough for the safety of women. Once again, their rights are being trampled on by gender ideology men who identify as women for their own intents and purposes. So brilliant policy, but I think we definitely need something here, and probably at a federal level, because every state has different policies. We need an overarching policy that's going to improve things across the board for these vulnerable women.
Yeah, well, you would think that the feminists would be, have plenty to say about this, and typically on this issue they are silent. Now, lastly, and my favourite gender meltdown this week is from Allan Madawi, writing for our friends at The Guardian. Now, her op-ed proffers the question, after his executive order on sex, is Trump legally the first female president? Now, look, we've seen some drivel out of The Guardian over the years, but this article just makes me feel like the world is healing and the morons are outing themselves. What was this all about?
It was absolutely absurd to claim that, scientists no longer agree that sex is binary. And, I mean, the reality is sex is actually determined from conception, because the male sperm determines sex. The sex characteristics might take a little while to determine, but in most cases, in most normal cases, it's already there. I think this is just histrionics, and the organisations like the Guardian and their misinformation continue to publish this information, but people are switching off. I mean, more and more people are getting their news and information from social media, and there's a reason for that, because they've lost credibility. So I think if these organisations, if they want to sustain themselves, they need to get back to factual reporting, telling the truth, and to stop misleading the public with this misinformation.
And go back to posting on X so they can get some more feedback. Thank you so much, Steph Bastiaan, for joining us.